But the writing was not something that I really saw happening. The reason I started writing was because, my grandmother, I remember my grandmother would say, tell us stories about mom. And she didn't really remember all the stories that, I just felt like they got lost in there somewhere. And she always told us the same story. And then I remember saying, to my mom, tell us stories. Well, my mom ended up passing away when I was only 35. And she was a kindergarten teacher. And she had the funniest stories. She would come home from school like almost every night with some fun kid story, some really fun kid story. And she passed away and they're all gone.
Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I geek out about the stories we're passionate about in all different genres, styles, and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and I started this podcast in the summer of 2020 at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. As I watched the reaction of my friends, family, and social media circle, I noticed that many people turned to stories for comfort and help in making sense of the craziness going on around them. My goal was to do the same for my listeners, but as I chatted with my guests throughout the first year, I discovered that their personal stories were the most fascinating thing about each episode. Neil Gaiman says, fairy tales are more than true not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. I now know that sharing our experiences with others helps us defeat our own dragons. It is our stories that connect us to one another. Let's see what wisdom today's guest has to share with us. Today I'm talking with Lorrie Grant, and this is episode 66. Lorrie, I'm so excited to talk to you today about all of your creative endeavors. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. Thanks.
So I have not talked to anyone who writes children's books. So I wanted you to talk about that. And then you have a new podcast that you just started, and I wanted to find out about your writing process. So You start where you would like to start.
Gosh. I will start by just telling you why I started writing to begin with, I guess.
Okay.
I never saw it on the radar. That was never something I thought I would ever do. Musician. I've been a musician. I've been, I have the creative side to me. But the writing was not something that I really saw happening. The reason I started writing was because, my grandmother, I remember my grandmother would say, tell us stories about mom. And she didn't really remember all the stories that, I just felt like they got lost in there somewhere. And she always told us the same story. And then I remember saying, to my mom, tell us stories. Well, my mom ended up passing away when I was only 35. And she was a kindergarten teacher. And she had the funniest stories. She would come home from school like almost every night with some fun kid story, some really fun kid story. And she passed away and they're all gone. Gone. And there's so many times when I was raising my kids where I thought, oh, I wonder, if my mom had a situation like this, or I wonder what she would have done in this situation. So I'm one of those people that a lot of stuff happens to. I'm always just in the right place at the right time, apparently. And so I started capturing my little stories of things that were happening to me, just writing them down for my daughters. And the way I would write them is I'd write the story and then I'd write the lesson that I learned from it. And I would just, and I just started doing that. And it was, it was just on a laptop somewhere. It was not, it was nothing for anybody else to read. And I was hoping, well, someday I'll just put them all together and here you go, kids, Don't say I didn't warn you. Here's your stories, right? Well, and then I started teaching a women's class and I brought one of these stories to me, to the meeting. And when it's because it related directly with what we were talking about that evening. And one of the women said, well, how many of these stories do you have? And I just started laughing. I said, I write them all the time. And they said, well, we want you to bring one every week. Wait a minute. And so that's how it started. I started writing for my kids and I started writing for this class. And then someone said, you do this so often, you ought to just start a blog and you should just start capturing on a blog. So I kind of dabbled in the blog thing for a little while. Sometimes sometimes I'm consistent, sometimes I'm not. And then in the meantime, my best friend's daughter was going to go to art school. And we were on a trip somewhere where I was sitting in a hotel room in New York City, actually. And I asked her to go get her a drawing. She does kind of this anime illustration kind of stuff. Beautiful, fabulous artist. She was young. She was going to go into art school and she didn't have a portfolio. She'd never had a job. So we're looking through these pictures and I said, how about I just write you a story and you illustrate it? I didn't think that was weird. Apparently it was weird. And so I wrote the story and I was just kind of looking into how we could get it published just for us and all that. And I had so much fun doing it. Well, she was still very young and quite immature at the time. She did the main character and never touched it again. But it was so much fun that's kind of how it started. And so I ended up writing a second book, which I didn't use because, and I'll tell you more about this in a minute, but a situation happened in my life and that turned into a children's book because it was a lesson that I learned, and that turned into a children's book and it was off. That was it. It was off and running. And the way that I knew that I should keep writing kids' books was the message to the first book. I presented the book. It's called Why Is There an Elephant in My Basement? And it's a book about excuses and accountability. So it's why is there an elephant in the basement? Oh, because of this, and oh, because of that, and oh, because of this. And you never really get the answer why the elephant's there. The elephant is there for all of these excuses, but what's the real reason the elephant's in the basement? Obviously taken from why is there an elephant in the room, right?
Right.
And at the very end, it says, why is there an elephant in my basement? It's because I let her in. So it's about excuses and accountability. You can have all these excuses, but the real reason is you got to take care of your elephants. So I presented this book to a group of musicians, high school students, and they were giving me a hard time. Miss Lorrie, you're not going to read a kid's book to us. How old do you think we are? Come on, guys, just let me. They didn't know it was my book. I didn't tell them it was my book. And so we go through the book and I said, what does the elephant represent? And they just kind of gave me this blank stare like, oh my gosh, there's more to this. And I said, elephant is something in your life that shouldn't be there. And the basement is your life. So we talked about things, on a student level, on a high school level. What are things that are in your, what are your elephants in your basement? What are things in your life that shouldn't be there? We talked all through this. About 6 months later, one of my students came up and sat down next to me and said, guess what, Miss Lorrie? I got rid of an elephant out of my basement this week. Holy cow. They heard it.
That's great.
So that was kind of my encouragement. Like, yeah, maybe I can do this. And so my second book is called Little White Flies, taken from the Expressionist, Just a Little White Lie. So it's about honesty. And my third book is called I Am Beautiful Too. And it's about a sweet little white peacock who doesn't think he's beautiful because he has no color. And I don't know if you've ever seen a white peacock, but they are stunning. They're so beautiful. And so he goes through the zoo collecting colors from all these other animals, and then he's just a hot mess. He's just a mess. And he goes to the white, wise snow owl, and the owl tells him that he's beautiful just the way he is. And so at the end of the book, he sees his reflection and he's turned back to white, and he said, I am beautiful too. He realizes that he is beautiful. And I think that book was really driven by self-image and so many of us feeling that we're just not quite good enough. We're not beautiful. So that's what that one was. And so that's that book. So those my books.
That's
got
great.
2 more in the works.
Cool.
Yeah, the next ones, I'm not sure which one's going to be released first. I'll have one for 22 and one for 23. But I've got one that's called Dragon Breath, and it's about hurtful words and how harmful our words can be. And the other one is about little Arnie, the firefly, his light isn't quite as bright as everyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
And he and Jewel become friends, and they realize the light of two fireflies can get you through just about anything. So those are the two that are coming. So yeah.
Now, where are those available?
They are available on Amazon, and they're also available. Thank you. They're also available on my website, as well as my blog is there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's www.lorriedgrant.com. That's where my website is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yeah, I will put all of that in the show notes, the titles of the books and where they're available. And
thanks.
Yeah. Yes. So that's a great story. I love it.
It's fun. Yeah.
And because, creativity is sort of an evolutionary process. So, and you were just telling about your evolutionary process to becoming an author.
It was just not what I expected, and and I think that for writers, I just want to encourage them to just write, just do it, take the pressure off and just do it because it's fun and you love it.
Mm-hmm.
And just sit down and do it. You just don't know where it's going to go.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I never thought I never saw a correlation from going from blogs to children's books.
Well, yeah, I was talking to somebody else not too long ago about that writing it doesn't matter what kind of writing you do. It's good to write, even if it's just in your journal.
Right.
That's a really good thing. So, because that's how, I don't know about anybody else, but that's how I figure stuff out is writing in my journal or writing my blog. So
it's been fun. And so I'll go ahead and tell you about the podcast too. And so the podcast is really an extension of the blogging because I'm a storyteller. That's what I do. And just like my stories are all based on something that is real and true. And, so is my podcast. Now my podcast is a little different because each episode is going to be less than 20 minutes. It's not going to be an hour long like many of them are, but it's just real stories of real life people and everyday experiences. And the only catch is at the end, you tell me your story and I'm going to say, what did you learn from that? And that's the message part. You've got the storyteller with the message. So it's going to take me a little while to get it rolling because I don't know who's going to want to tell their stories. And I'm finding that when I go and say, hey, just any story, the story that you would tell your friends around the coffee table, you're not going to believe what happened to me today. Those stories. When I ask somebody, do you have a story for me? They always say, oh no, I don't have a story.
I'm not very interesting. That's
so funny because you can have a conversation with anybody and they're going to relate to something and have a story about it. But when you ask them, they go blank.
Yeah, they don't think they're very interesting or that they have anything to say. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So what's the title of your podcast?
Called Storytellers with a Message.
Storytellers with a Message. And can you find it anywhere? Where are the... Oh.
I'm sorry. Yes. Well, no, you can find it on Spotify and you can find it on Apple.
Okay, great.
Both of those. And then right now I'm doing a website for it. It will be www.storytellerswithamessage.com.
Oh, okay. So you
got it all built. I just don't have it linked yet.
Yeah. Well, because I was going to ask you if you had a tab for it on your other, because I just did it all. All mine is on one website. My books, my podcast, my blog, they're all on one because I'm not technologically
advanced. The website is killing me. So I need to, I wasn't going to update my author's website until I get my next book out because it's going to have to be updated when I get the book out anyway. And I'm hoping the next book will come out in June. So I'm just going to wait because I have to hire somebody to do that. I am awful at WordPress. I don't get it. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I don't get it either. And even my husband, who is a techie, he had to get help when he was helping me revamp my WordPress website. Yeah, because I don't know. It's not. I guess it's not intuitive in the way he's used to, or something. It's definitely not intuitive for me. I'm I don't really get it.
Yeah. So I've already built it. I built it on a different platform. So,
okay.
So it's ready to roll. All I have to do is figure out how to link it to my domain name.
Oh, right.
So it's ready to go.
Yeah.
And I do have an email set up for storytellers with a message also. So if anybody hearing this wants to tell me a story and do a podcast with me and tell me a story, Lucinda, I would love for you to tell me a story on my podcast. I think it would be so much fun. All they have to do is just send me an email to storytellerswiththemessage@gmail.com.
Okay, great.
Easy.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Probably my issue would be which story to tell.
I know. Well, but it doesn't mean you're limited to one, I mean, we can record as many as you want.
Yeah. Well, the episode that I'm editing now, Justin Lamb is his name, and he has a podcast too, but it's called Friend Request. And he is interviewing the people who are friends of, quote unquote, friends of his on Facebook that, there are people.
And he doesn't know who they are.
Well, he knew who they were back in high school, but you know how when you don't see them for years, all these things happen. So he just goes through his friend list. And yeah, he probably has other people now too.
Sure.
But he said, if I had $1 for every single person who said, oh, I don't have any stories to tell, I don't have anything interesting to say, he said, I'd have $1 million probably.
Right. Well, I was talking to my nephew, and my nephew has, he's that guy. He should be a movie star. He's very handsome. And he's very charismatic. And so he ended up hitting the surfing and bodyboarding network. Mm-hmm. He grew up in San Diego, and, great athlete, et cetera, et cetera. And his name is Zach. And I said, Zach, I want you to just come on my podcast. Now, again, I've just started it. So I've only got my trailer episode and episode 1. That's all I've got in there so far. And I said, Zach, I want to interview you. I want to learn how to interview people and start doing this because I think people's stories are amazing. He says, Aunt Lorrie, I don't have any stories. I said, Zach, what about surfing stories? What about, and he goes, oh, I don't really have anything. And I said, listen, I'm a certified scuba diver. Have you ever seen a shark? He goes, oh, well, one time this shark started chasing me on my board. He went onto this story. And I was like, Zach, that's exactly what I'm looking for. That's exactly, but people it's like we have to prime them somehow.
Right.
Kind of remind them of these stories, these experiences.
Yes, really.
But how interesting to hear somebody talk about being chased on their surfboard by a shark.
Oh, yeah, that's scary.
And then, so anyway, hopefully I'll get him to tell me his shark story.
Good. I hope so too. Well, he probably has a bunch of surfing stories.
That's, but I think as an interviewer, we have to find the right questions. And this is all new to me. I've not, so everything I've done are my stories. I'm telling you my stories, what I learned from them, material, and I can start pumping those out. But I'd really like my platform to be one for other people and their experiences, and what they've learned, and maybe we can relate to them. And
yeah, that's fantastic. I love it because it will be recorded. It'll be there forever, and anything that's written or recorded, it just is around for a long time, and somebody will find it. The people who are meant to find it will find it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Out there.
I love that. Yeah. I love that.
So I'm excited. I just need to learn the interviewing piece of it, but we'll get there.
Yeah. Well, for me, I'm a teacher, so I'm just used to asking all kinds of questions. And actually, that's, I guess, the thing that has helped me the most is just listening. And then, a question comes into my head. Oh, and then I ask that question, Yeah. So it sounds like you're off to a good start, though.
I'm having a ball.
Oh, that's great. Good.
And I'm having a ball. And so between the books and then starting this, and I'm just having a ball. And
Mhm.
I didn't think, I'd have two books going at the same time, but I was concerned about a deadline. And so
Mhm.
now I've got all this fun, creative stuff going on around me.
Yes, really. Well, and you can surf Podmatch and find people to tell their stories because I love Podmatch.
So that's the one thing I have left to do is I need to go out on Podmatch and I need to put my podcast in.
Mhm. Mhm.
I've been looking, to talk to people about their podcasts and how they work
Mhm.
and all that, but I've not put mine out there looking for guests yet.
Yeah, well, when you do, I'm sure you'll start finding a bunch of people who will be willing to tell their stories.
Okay.
Yeah, because I have here we are April of 2022 and I have enough to get me through February of 2023. So
Wow.
yeah,
So,
really.
so what other things would you want to talk about for your podcast? Is there anything particular?
Well, you mentioned that you are a musician, so talk about that. How did you start loving music and what do you play or do you sing? Do
Yes
you
and yes.
write? And do you write
I
music?
used to. So I grew up in a very musical family.
Mm.
So, and a very, very strong Christian home.
Hmm.
And so I started doing music when I was very young. And I actually started as playing the drums in middle school. And that's,
Oh.
I'm a storyteller, so I'm going to be telling you stories. My brother wanted a drum set, and my parents said, you cannot have a drum set and take drumming lessons unless your sister will take drumming lessons too. I didn't really care if I played the drums, but he convinced me that I wanted to learn how to play the drums so he could get a drum set. That's how it started. So I played percussion in sixth and seventh and eighth grade. But eighth grade, my brother told me that I wasn't a real musician. He was a phenomenal musician.
Mm-hmm.
This guy could play any brass instrument. In fact, he was first chair at San Diego State University, and he wasn't a music major. So
Oh,
he
wow.
was a phenomenal. He had a full ride music scholarship at Point Loma Nazarene as a freshman.
Wow.
Amazing musician. And yeah, so the drums thing was just a fun thing for him. He already played the trombone,
Mm-hmm.
but he could play any instrument he picked up. He
Wow.
taught himself guitar, banjo, mandolin, just a phenomenal musician. So here we are in band, and he told me that I wasn't a musician, I couldn't play anything. And I said, well, what's the hardest instrument in the band? That's what I said to him. He said, it's a French horn. I said, okay, I'm going to play French horn. He said, you'll never be able to play French horn. And I said, I don't play French horn. So I played for eighth and ninth grade, and I was pretty terrible, but I played. I was pretty terrible. I'm just saying, I was pretty terrible, but I still played it.
Uh-huh.
And so after my freshman year, I didn't really want to be in band. My mom said, why don't you go sing? And I thought that was ridiculous. But that's really what ended up happening. I ended up being a praise and worship leader for almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I played piano and I led music as a team usually. And I did, music at weddings, and I did funerals, and I did specials, and so I sang a lot. So that's where the music kind of came from. Mm-hmm. And then, years down the road, this is where the high school students came in. I was on one of the praise bands of a pretty large church. Mm-hmm. And we had two praise teams, two bands. It was one band, but we had, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off kind of thing.
I see. Mm-hmm.
So we weren't doing this every single week. And then we had the same thing with our high school students. We had two high school bands. Mm-hmm. So I was on one of the teams, one of the main teams. And then I also led one of the high school bands. And I did that for about 6 years.
Oh, wow. Cool.
A lot of my stories will involve music or will involve, I think the one that I'm going to publish this week is about one of my guitar players named Ben. And cool. he was a phenomenal guitar player. I mean, these kids were good musicians. I got to say they were very talented. And Ben was young when I met him, and he was cocky, and he was and he was, we called him Thrasher, or the kids called him Thrasher, because everything was at 100% volume.
Oh,
It was all about Ben and his loud guitar. I struggled with him. And and as time went on, and he matured and started learning things. I believe it was when he was a senior, and we were all very close. And when he was a senior, he had some weird nerve thing happen to his left hand, and he was told he had to stop playing guitar. And all of us were devastated. We were crushed. And so he didn't show up for practice. He didn't show up we would practice on Sunday afternoons, and our youth group was on Wednesday nights. He didn't show up Wednesday night. And don't you know, that next Sunday he came walking in and he sat down right next to me, and he mentored the younger guitar player, and he taught that guitar player to do the things that only Ben knew how to do. And he did that for 12 weeks.
wow.
And sat next to me, and he could hear the volume. He could hear different things. We talked about what I'm looking for, what I'm listening for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you. And so this is the cool part of the story. So 12 weeks later, he comes in on our Wednesday night. He had a doctor's appointment on that Wednesday night, and he came in and he was just like smile from ear to ear. And, we had a really strict rule. If you didn't practice Sunday, you didn't perform on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like in sports. If you don't show up to practice, you don't get to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
You're similar.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes in and he's just beaming. And he said, my doctor said that I can work back into it really easy. I have to watch how much time, blah, 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 blah. And it just so happened that night that our bass player was gone. Now, bass playing and electric guitar playing are very different,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And we're asking Ben, Ben's like, I haven't had a guitar in my hands in this amount of time. And I haven't touched, there's no way I'm going to play bass for you guys. In the time he was trying to make up his mind, one of the other students had run across the parking lot and gotten him a bass guitar. That's how much they love this kid.
Uh-huh.
And it was just the neatest story. And so he walks in and he says, Ben, we have this, we want you to play. And Ben just kind of looked at us, and we're all just, it didn't matter what the rule was that night. We wanted Ben to play.
Right.
And the bass guitar did not have a strap on it. So Ben very humbly goes over and he gets a chair and he puts it way off to the side where the bass player normally, not front center where Thrasher usually is.
Mm-hmm.
And he puts it, and he sat there very quietly for the entire set and played bass. And I sat in the back crying because I was so happy to see him playing.
Oh, that's
just what a cool. So obviously the lesson is humility, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Super cool story. Super, super cool kid.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of stories I tell.
Well, that's great. That's so cool. Yeah. I have a music story.
Great.
I was, when I first started, I sang in choir and solos and stuff at church. And, people said, oh, you have a beautiful voice. Well, I didn't know if it was beautiful or not. But when I went to college, my dad said, why don't you declare music as your major? Well, I had taken piano lessons when I was a kid, but we lived in all these really small towns and, it was inconsistent and I didn't really know how to read music. But one of the things they said is take piano lessons so that you can help yourself learn the songs. And so I did. And at the end of the semester, the piano teacher said, did you ever think the piano is not your instrument? I just laughed and I said, I only took it so that I could help myself sing. But by that time, I had decided to declare a different major. So, but I laughed at that. I thought it was just so funny.
I was told multiple times that I couldn't sing. And I think that is hysterical. Even when I was a senior. So I was a soloist in the ensemble group as a senior.
Mm-hmm.
Our ensemble group had 12 members. And there were 2 soloists.
Uh-huh.
And so I try out I'd never done drama. So I try out for the play for that year. I think they did 2 a year. I don't know. I wasn't really part of the drama team. And I tried out for this part. then they do all these callbacks and they're talking to everybody and they bring me in and they say, well, Lorrie, your dancing and stuff was fine. It was good, And I was like, okay. And you did great on the acting part. For somebody that's never been in drama, you did great on that. And she says, but honey, you just can't sing. I started laughing. I started laughing and I said, it wasn't one of those, do you know who I am things, but I said, do you know that I'm an ensemble and I'm one of the 2 seniors in the high school that are soloists? And she looks at her notes. And she goes, I have it written down that you can't sing. And I said, well, I'm not sure what happened here. You might want to talk to Mr. Moss, the music director. And I said, but I'm fine. I've got so many things on my plate. I'm fine with it. Well, come to find out, she had mixed me up with another student.
Oh no. That's so funny.
I think, and it's funny because I don't remember the face of the girl, but I know her name was Karen. That's all I know. That's all I remember. So she comes back to me and she says, I mixed you up with this other student, but I don't know what to do. And I just said, look, it's not that important to me. I've never been in a drama. It wasn't that important, but I think it's really funny,
Yeah, it is.
Honey, you can't sing. Have you been to any of the music productions at the school?
All right.
What?
Yeah, really. Well, and the music teacher wasn't helping with the music. If it was a musical,
it was all the drama. No. So the music, the guy that did the music of the high school did the orchestra, and he did the band, and he did the vocal choirs. But he was not involved in drama.
Oh, well, that's funny because at the high school when I taught drama for 2 years, and the one of the music teachers was the music director. So there was the acting director, and he was the music director. Okay. And then I can't remember who did the choreography, but we had somebody else so we had 3 basic people.
Yeah.
And usually that's the way it is in theater. I mean, I'm a theater person. So
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I never, ever, ever was in, ever.
Oh, well.
Kind of a drama where I had to speak or.
Oh, that's so funny. I love it. And maybe you don't care.
I seriously don't care.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I continued to be involved in choir when I did religious studies was my major that I declared the second semester of my first year there. And I took a lot of literature classes, crossover literature classes with that. And then my husband is younger than I am. I didn't go to college until I was 22. So when I was waiting for him, I had been involved in theater and taken some theater classes. So I just added theater and speeches as my second major and in my BA. And then I got a master's in theater later. And so now I'm teaching theater and I've taught it, off and on in different various ways. Yeah. So yeah, I think this year at the end of this school year is going to be, or at the end of December, actually, is going to be I'm going to end my teaching career. Yeah, because
it's because you're a mighty podcaster now.
Yeah, and I love doing, I don't know about mighty, but I love doing my podcast so much that, yeah, I just want to concentrate on that. And then on the side, I'll do the writing. And I'm working on my second novel. I started writing on it again. I was stalled on it for a while. Well, I started it in 2014, and it's a sequel to the first novel, which has 2 timelines. And the woman in the past goes from Vermont to Oregon on the Oregon Trail to become a teacher in 1859. That's the year Oregon became a state. So during the Civil War, it was California and Oregon, and then this huge territory in between, and then all the states, in the Midwest and the West and the East. And So my husband did the maps for me. He's an artist, and he laid out the book and all that. And then there's
Okay.
the woman in the present is the 3 times great granddaughter of the woman in the past, and she finds her journals and at this
Oh,
really crucial time in her life, and she starts to her consciousness enters her 3 times great grandmother, so she gets to go live life in the 1800s. And so the second one, I wanted Morgan in the past to be involved in the suffrage movement. Well, in 2014, there was nothing going on in the women's movement, so it was like, oh, what am I going to have Jenna do? And then in 2017, it was like, oh, now I have something to write about, because of the Me Too movement and stuff. But then I was stalled again. I can't remember why. And then when COVID hit, it was like, oh, do I include COVID?
yeah. I'm a pretty avid reader, and the book that I'm reading, I read them so fast, I don't even remember the titles of them, but it's in the other room. But it has incorporated COVID and masks in the book, and I'm thinking, wow, has our world changed?
I know. Yeah.
And here's what's funny about the whole podcast thing for me is it was something that I thought that I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I didn't do it right in the pandemic when I quit writing. I just stopped doing everything during the pandemic when I could have been using that time for all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, I've worked from home for quite,
you work for a nonprofit?
I do. Yeah, I had a big girl career and decided that I was done with that after 20 years. And so, so I do contracts management for it's called Educational Media Foundation.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a media company. And so, but I work from home and I work in my little office here. And I don't know, that's all I did. And I didn't really, I couldn't go do music anywhere.
Right.
So the music thing stopped. I don't know why I stopped blogging. I just wasn't, I think people kind of energize me or remind me of stories, and then I come home and capture them.
Right.
And if I'm not out and about, I just couldn't really, I just didn't feel like writing. And so it's kind of interesting. And that's why my books are 2017, 18, 19. I don't have 20 or 21. I just, my third book came out right before it came out in November, and then the pandemic hit in March. So I've not been able to get on a market at all. Not that I'm a good marketer, but the marketing part is the hardest part of book writing.
That is the hardest part. And I am not very good at it, except that now I get to talk about it on my podcast, or sometimes I'll write about it in my blog, but I am going to start a Patreon community, and I
think I am as well.
Yeah. So I think I'll probably, read excerpts from the first book or maybe the second book, occasionally. And I do want to have live author events, and I think I just want to have like a story group, not a book club group really necessarily, but where people tell, and it might just be a forum kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But where people say, oh, wow, I saw this great movie and this is what I got out of it. And, or a television show, or like I would probably write about Ted Lasso, which I didn't even really want to watch, but my husband loves it. And so I sat and watched it with him, and it was like, why did I resist watching this? It's such a great show, Or whatever. If it could be a book that they've read, could be sometimes articles are really very moving, or I learned something really great from them, or so that kind of thing. Just stories, just people telling their stories and that they have consumed and enjoyed, and share that with other people. Because the only podcast that I listen to every single week is What Should I Read Next? And I get all kinds of really great ideas about books to read from that.
Yeah.
And it's one guest, and they talk about their reading life and the books that they enjoy. And then Ann Vogel's the host, and she'll pick 3 books for them to try to read.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's sort of a book whisperer.
Well, and I think for me, that's kind of this segue why I started writing. Again, my mom being a kindergarten teacher, we had kids' books. We had a lot of kids' books. We had a huge bookshelf and all these beautiful books, kids' books. And in fact, I remember my younger brother, I have a brother that's 7 years younger than I am. And he was kind of a handful. And my mom would say, oh, just go ask your sister to read you a book. And so he would go over and he'd pick out like 5 books, and he'd bring them over to me in a stack, plop them down. And it's the only time the kid ever sat still. And so we would read. So I was surrounded by kids' books. So later now it kind of makes sense. But the kids' writing is just, for me, it's just this fun, creative outlet. I can kind of see the characters in my head, and it's a fun process. And the first one is really hard, and the second one is easier as far as getting through the process of how to do it and and all of that. And I just think kids' books are cool. They have cool messages.
They are. And do you have an illustrator now that works with you on all the ones from the second book on, or do you have a different illustrator?
So I used one illustrator that I found. She had never illustrated a book. So it was kind of the same as this gal that I had told you about originally. She was a phenomenal artist. Her name is Sunny. And so she did my first 2 books. And then she got really popular. And it was very fun because I felt like I kind of helped her kind of kickstart her. It was fun. And so then my 3rd book, I Am Beautiful Too, ended up being illustrated by Katie, who was the original person, my friend's daughter. She had graduated from school, and I wrote her a contract, and she did my book number 3. Cool. So the next 2 books are up in the air yet. So I have one of them. They're from people I don't know at this point. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, because I was thinking, if you have a concept in your head of what the characters look like and so on and so forth, how do you translate that to?
That is one of the most interesting pieces. So you start finding artists, you start looking, there's places, there's a website called Guru, and there's another one called Upwork. And both of them are for just independent people. There's a word, I can't think of it right now. I'm struggling it's not entrepreneur, it's a different word, but they just go out there and freelance is the word I'm looking for. They're freelancers. And so you just look at their work and you just look at their style and see if it kind of matches what you have in your head. And then you have to find a way to describe it and see if you can get out of your head a description to the artist, which is, it's challenging and it's fun. But if you're doing a children's book and you go to a traditional publisher, you don't get to choose the illustrations. They do it for you. And, and I've got these characters running around in my head, and I just need to get them out of there and on paper. And that's why I love doing a self-publish.
Right.
Either way, but my head is very visual and creative. And so I can see my second book, Little White Flies, is about 6 piglets. And so I had these 6 piglets running amok in my head. They were making me crazy, and I needed to get them out on paper and get it done so I could. It was kind of funny because I don't necessarily write a book from beginning to end. And so a lot of times I kind of write the beginning because have an idea of the setting that I want.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of have the end because I know what the message is that I want.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of fill it in between.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my head, it's like this loop
Mm-hmm.
of the story. And I will never write a book with 6 of anything again, because they were just bouncing everywhere in my brain. 66 piglets. And I think that book was the most fun to write so far of the 3.
Mm-hmm.
The easiest book that I wrote was the first one.
Mm-hmm.
It took no time to write it. The middle book was the most fun to write because I used all the piglets have names that begin with a P.
Mm-hmm.
All the food items that they eat begin with the letter P. Every name in the book begins with, like, the teacher's name is Mr. Potbelly.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And the name of the market is Ms. Pickles Market.
Uh-huh.
She sells popcorn and peanuts and everything that begins with the letter P. It was really fun to write. It was super fun to write.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. So, I'm just having a good time with it. But I think people don't shy away. I mean, if I were to give any advice, particularly with children's books, because they're a little more scary to do self-publishing, you can figure it out. Just be patient. It takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time to do it, but you can do it and you can have a really good product. You just need to take your time and not be in a hurry to get that book in your hand.
Right. Yes. And find the right people to collaborate with.
Yes.
Right.
But there's, as you get into it, you start meeting more and more people and you start finding more and more, different skill levels, different experience levels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. I love it. Well, that's cool. Well, thank you so much for being my guest. Do you have anything else you want to say?
No, it's just my pleasure. Yeah. I mean, I would love to have you on my new podcast if you're interested.
Oh, sure.
Sometime.
Yeah. Right. So once you get set up as a podcaster, contact me and I will do that. I would love that.
Well, think about a fun story and the lesson you learned from it, and we'll go from there.
Okay, great.
It was so nice to meet you.
It was. Thank you so much, Lorrie.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Before I go, I'd like to give a big shout out to Podmatch, which I call a dating service for podcasters. Since I joined their platform, I have met so many wonderful people from all over the world, and they make the matches so easy that if you are a podcaster or you have a message that you want to share, you might want to consider checking them out. The affiliate link is at the bottom of my show notes on my website at sagewoman@sagewoman.life. Part of what I love about them is that they promote civil conversations, and can't we use that right now? So if you check them out, tell them Lucinda sent you. I'd also like to invite you to my Patreon community, where we will have chats with authors or creators. We'll have member chats about the stories that they love, and occasionally we'll have extra episodes or uncut episodes of Story Power. So please go check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/storypower without the hyphen, all one word. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. You'll find the show notes for this episode at my website, Sage Woman Chronicles, at sagewoman.life. You can leave a comment there. And remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.